Zimbabwe cash crisis. We're talking about Venezuela once again.
Systemic important banks. They removed the one factor into the framework called monetary independence.
Hey there, hope all is well. Back here today with some RT News updates. As you tell from today's title, we're going to be talking about whether or not the World Bank possibly sees a crisis coming, and it has to do with this gentleman right here resigning as of this past Friday to go join a private equity firm after he was in charge of the World Bank, which was an overseer of lending to impoverished nations. But it's very surprising that he's leaving a couple years earlier, well before his time is up. I wonder why. So today I got about 2 articles or so we're going to cover. And as always, feel free to scroll down below to get more of this information for yourself. But more importantly, we just want to be brief and concise and straight to the point. But before I dive into those articles, as always,
Recession will be a recession.
We're going to hit a recession.
The date of the next recession.
You have the right plan to set up. You can make a lot of money from this.
As I mentioned, I have a couple articles I want to share with you in reference to this gentleman right here, all of a sudden resigning in the middle of his term and then joining a private equity firm. And it's good to say that the answer to this question is yes. I would imagine that all the too big to fail banks as well as the central banks know that something's occurring. If you just look at what's happening here in the United States of America over the last year or two under President Trump's term, there's been a lot of Federal Reserve board members that have resigned or also hung it up early, which at that time had me wondering exactly what are they preparing for or running from. And so I want to just share 2 articles with you briefly, thumb through some of the information and share my thoughts at the very end. But as always, scroll down below to get more for yourself. First article here from The Guardian came out last week, and it says the World Bank and IMF are in a crisis. So it's time to push a radical new vision. And then if I scroll down and give you a little bit of information, it's quite lengthy, but I'll highlight a few things I want to share with you. But basically here it says the president of the World Bank, Jim Young Kim, will step down on the February 1st, this past Friday, 3.5 years before the end of his term. 3.5 years before his term, in search of greener pastures. Says his readiness to resign from the leadership of one of the 2 most powerful international financial institutions is a worrying omen, but it's also an important wake-up call. Says the World Bank and IMF are the last remaining columns of the Bretton Woods edifice, under which capitalism experienced its golden age in the 1950s and 60s. So just to stop right there. Last 2 structures of the Bretton Woods agreements are the World Bank and IMF, and we all know over the last decade plus since the Great Recession, our Eastern partners over there, Russia and China, have been forming a lot of other institutions to rival these 2 institutions here, which I believe plays into this whole narrative of the World Bank and IMF seeing or realizing a crisis is brewing. And to scroll down a little bit more, it says, Kim, a career physician who presented himself as a champion of poverty alleviation, now leaves the fate of the bank's leadership in the hands of Donald Trump. This sort of affair is an excellent opportunity to mobilize around an entirely new vision for the Bretton Woods institution. And so as I scroll down below, it gives you more insight as to some of the things I highlighted. It says, John Maynard Keynes, the chief British negotiator at Bretton Woods, was worried that the new system could only rely on the dollar as long as America had a trade surplus. So John Maynard Keynes, one of the founding fathers of this whole Bretton Woods system in a sense, was concerned that the new system could only rely on the dollar as long as America had a trade surplus. And if you know, for the last 20 years, we haven't had a trade surplus. We've been running an ever-increasing deficit. Scroll down some more. So Keynes suggested that instead of building the new world order on the dollar, all major economies would subscribe to a multilateral international clearing union, ICU. Says while keeping their own currencies, and central banks countries would agree to denominate all international payments in a common accounting unit, world money. Says once set up, the ICU would tax persistent surpluses and deficits symmetrically so as to balance out capital flows, volatility, global aggregate demand, and productivity. So basically, in a nutshell, having a world currency and then taxing every government according to the designing structure of that world currency and the laws applied to it. It says, but Keynes' ICU was rejected. The United States was unwilling to replace the dollar as the anchor of the new monetary system. And so the ICU was rejected because the U.S. refused to replace the dollar. So the goal since 1971, basically the end of the true Bretton Woods agreement when the dollar was pegged to gold, when it ended, from that point on, the dollar became a floating fiat currency, hence the deficits as well as the large monetary base we have now. But yet John Maynard Keynes at that time knew, unless we kept a trade surplus, we would eventually have problems because of too much debt. Scroll down below. Following large U.S. trade deficits, the President Nixon announced on 1971 the end of the Bretton Woods system as Keynes knew it. It says immediately the private banks which the Bretton Woods system had been keeping under a lid sprang up and the world was taken over by financialization, credit extension, and more debt. Scroll down some more. This gets into Jim Young Kim. It says Jim Young Kim was a fierce critic of Washington consensus. In his book, The Dying for Growth, published in 2000, Kim rallied against the world's banking free marketeering, the cost of which, quote, have been borne by the poor, the infirm, and the vulnerable in poor countries that accepted the experts. So basically, give an idea what's going on. He started off as a career physician to fight against poverty, but eventually became a person who facilitated the extraction of wealth from all these poor nations and allowing private institutions to be the overseers of lending. So it gives more detail of that in this paragraph here. But the very last thing here says, from this perspective, it makes perfect sense that Mr. Kim resigned early to take up a post at a private equity firm. Interesting. He leaves a private organization to fund the poor to then join another private equity firm to probably continue to steal from the poor. It says the world today needs, as much as it did in 1944, a massive international investment program. Massive international investment program? More like debt machine. It says, where will the money come from? Surely not from the stressed budget of our states. Here's an idea. Build a new Bretton Woods and fund the International Green New Deal. So, as one system ends because of too much debt, build another one based upon the same type of idea. Won't work. That's why there's alternatives outside of this current monetary structure, precious metals, the blockchain technology, and things of that nature. Very last article here just says the World Bank controversial president has resigned from Vox. So basically today I just want to shine a little light on the idea that this past Friday, this gentleman here decided to retire to go work for a private equity firm after having pledged his life to helping out the poor, but realized that at this current moment, because credit and debt is at an all-time high, there's not a lot that he can do as a president of a private world bank. So the next best thing is to join a private equity firm and not be in the hot seat directly from draining nations of their natural resources and impoverishing the people even more so than they already have. And so this is what's happening right now. So it's no coincidence whatsoever that we have Federal Reserve board members retiring, presidents here retiring, not to mention whoever else we're not even aware of. These are things that are happening right now, and I believe it all has to do with the idea that they know that a recession is underway, and this next recession will be something like we probably haven't seen in modern history. So they're all taking cover, getting out of the limelight directly, because no one wants to have the blame pointed on them when this thing comes down. And so along with that, it's interesting how Ivanka Trump name has been floating around as a possible replacement or a consultant for this position in of itself. It spells trouble for me just because she has no background in global monetary policy or anything worthwhile for being a representative of this country. So just my 2 cents there. But more importantly, what do you guys think? Is this guy aware of some things that's happening right now? And is he jumping ship ahead of time? I would love to find out your thoughts. Leave a comment down below, and I'll definitely look forward to bringing you guys more news updates. See you later.